Hi, hello to everybody that is tuning in tonight for a wonderful evening with the Coach's Corner. I hope everybody's having a great weekend so far. Labor Day is coming up, which is awesome. And I am going to say just a couple words while everyone's getting settled, and I'll pass this off. So if you don't mind, feel free to ask a lot of questions. Everyone's happy to get questions, and we will try to get to everything that we can tonight. If we cannot, head over to the Coach's Corner because they're amazing, and they will be sure to get to your questions there if we don't have time. With that being said, I'm going to pass this off to Viscount Tristan to get us started.
Excellent. Thank you, Vesper. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Coach's Corner, the round table. Tonight's topic is sparring versus training, which is how to start to bring structure to your practice and not merely just have it be a sparring event where you just go out, put your armor on, fight, and hope you learn something. So to kind of get into this, I think realizing that where we are right now is we have a lot of people that have been not able to go to a fighting practice or fight for over a year and a half now. A lot of people are pretty anxious, ready to strap armor on and go have fun again. And that certainly needs to be taken into account. Kind of get that out of your system, be able to come back, get in your armor, go have some fun with your friends and enjoy SCA fighting. But I think there's something about realizing that sparring there's advantages, things you learn by sparring, but it has some pretty heavy disadvantages too. So I'd like to start this discussion this evening with sharing some advantages and disadvantages to sparring. So maybe I'll toss this to Duke Brannos to start us out with the advantages of sparring.
All right. Let me make sure. There you go. Some of the advantages, there was a number of things when we were talking about this earlier that come up in sparring. And this is really the society kind of started this way. I mean, there wasn't a lot of techniques and things that you could really go ahead and try to, drill to learn what we were doing because they're creating it on the go. And in some ways, we're a really young martial art still, and we're still creating it. But we've created enough, and we have enough of a base now that we have both sides. In the past, the people that had backgrounds in some sports or at least were athletic tended to kind of float to the top a bit because they could, burst faster or, throw faster or something that brought them to some of those people to the top of the list in that space. And sparring was the way they got there. Sparring, obviously some of the advantages of sparring is fun. You get to overcome that fear of being hit and hitting somebody else. You get to learn and understand the stress of combat. Some people handle that well. Sometimes you need sparring to know it's like as soon as somebody punches you in the face for the first time, you get this feeling it's like, okay, that hurt, but I'm still going. So you can get that stress out. And that becomes the same thing happens, in what we do. You get to learn how to read your opponents better. And I think this is the piece that we actually do better than many martial arts clubs do because they tend to drill with a little bit of sparring at the end, where we tend to spar, and maybe we'll throw some drilling in there. So that sparring tends to bring us into that place where we have to read people fast and we got to understand and figure out what they're doing. And so that kind of lays in that base for that. So, that's one of the other advantages that sparring has in that place. We get to see really if a technique that we're training works and who it works against and what you have to do to make it work. Because I can train a shot, but I can tell you there's a lot of stuff happening before that shot, timing and everything else to make it work. And you can't get there unless really you are sparring at a speed that allows you to understand and figure out that timing. And really the best way to get good at combat is combat, right? So the best way to be a good fighter is fight. And sparring allows us to get there. So, there's some of the pros or the advantages of and why we obviously should keep sparring. Ailgheanan, you got something on that?
Sure. The obvious here is is a lot of competitive people are ego driven, and that ego, it has its advantages. I mean, if you're ego driven, that's one of the things that actually tells you, get off your butt, don't watch Thursday night football or whatever it is, and go to practice, because you know that you're through practice is the only way you're going to get better, and you'll be able to basically feed your ego and feed the competitive drive in you. Then you get to practice and you start working on things. And, towards the later end of this program, we're absolutely going to lay out all the advantages of a more rounded training regimen. But sparring is well, as Brannos said, it's old school. It's all we did forever. I learned, I'd say the first half of everything I learned in fighting came from sparring and having to figure it out. It is not better to have to figure it out by yourself that way, but it is what we had. We didn't even really have a good means of communicating. If we weren't sparring and we were working on other things, we didn't have an effective means to communicate to each other necessarily what was going on until we evolved that over the course of the last 40, 50 years now. So we really only had sparring, and then we also mostly only had self-analysis, because you didn't have a lot of networking of, well, what can you explain to me what you did? Oftentimes the person couldn't explain to you what they did. So, that's what we had for a long time. Now, the advantage is once I learned how to, take what I got from sparring and then work on it, hone it, do better, definitely my own personal training path, I think I started going uphill faster. But however, as I start off this thing, the being competitive driven, being ego driven, the advantages to sparring is that's going to allow you to feed that relatively immediately. So, you go to practice, you get out there, hopefully people will do this. When you're sparring, it's really polite to let the other person know that you're sparring, because if they're training or working on something and you're just trying to, compete, you're competing, you're in tourney mode, then, that may or may not help the person who's in more of a training mode that you're going up against. So, let them know, get out there, work on it, push yourself. The important parts is that you've got to take sparring, and you've got to take the, whatever the competitive beast that you're working with there, and you've got to learn how to take the self-analysis of, and then the group analysis of, well, what's working, what's not working, and what are the actual effective things to do to fix it. It's not, you can't just say, well, you need to get your hand higher. Then you have to actually, you got to create the muscle memory of keeping your hand higher in certain situations, and you've got to understand why your hand why the hand placement needs to be where it needs to be. So, I'm a big proponent of sparring, but I got much better as a fighter when I learned how to effectively spar and how to discuss with everyone else that I was, the people that I was sparring with, what just happened and how can we actually make it better? How can we go forward in this? So, I definitely think a good practice is going to have plenty of sparring and then plenty of training and more conceptualized training, more drills. You want the balance.
Go ahead, Rivkin, if you want to go ahead and.
Yeah, I just want to sort of take the advantage from a different perspective, in that sparring and our focus on sparring in the SCA makes us very unique and accessible to people. And it makes it fun for people who come out the first time. They get to put on armor, they get to hit people. And I don't know if any of us remember way back to our first time, but I mean, what you want to do is hit people. And so I think from a recruiting perspective, having sparring at practice is really important, because it shows people what we actually do. And then I also agree with Ailgheanan that sparring, when you collectively decide that you're going to give each other feedback and let each other know what you're working on, and do it intelligently and mindfully, can be super productive in a training perspective. I think it's about communication, and we're going to talk later about evolving your fight practice. And I think the first step in evolving your fight practice is taking your sparring to the next level where you guys are communicating and helping each other.
Yeah,
and I wanted to add on a little bit to that, and I like that perspective that Rivkin brings up, and that is that really the sparring is the magic. As the first time somebody shows up to a practice and they want to try out armor and they want to get a helmet on and they want to grab a stick and they want to try to hit the other person, there is a moment there that really is unforgettable. So to me, that's a big advantage. Like, it's a big sell point for, all right, we're not going to put you through 6 months of classes on how to walk before you can actually get going. However, what I've found is that there's a pretty quick wall of, I don't even know what I'm doing, and usually it's the first time they actually get hit when they could have no idea how to stop it. And I think that's where we can tap into the excitement and the enjoyment aspect, and then guide somebody to say, all right, let me show you how this thing works. And that's where we bridge it from the sparring part into the training and then guide them. Ailgheanan, you had something you wanted to add in?
Yeah, I had you're speaking of the magic part. I had the extra magical moment last night of my 19-year-old stepdaughter. It was her first practice with sparring last night. So I was, she'd done it before, but she only armored up and was only striking. So now we felt like the armor was comfortable enough that she could receive a blow. And so it was her first evening of sparring. And while I am thrilled that she finally got to experience that firsthand, and, see, that's really when you decide whether or not this is something for you. All the other training bits before that, you don't really know yet if this is your activity or one of your sports, until you've gotten hit and realize, oh, I can cope with that. And, I want to get to the hitting. So she was able to go through all that great. And I felt really proud, but I was as proud as everyone she sparred with as I was of her finally getting a chance to spar. Everyone that she had an opportunity to work with while it was sparring took an opportunity to try to impart something to her. It wasn't just let's fight and then you go away. It was let's spar and let's talk about what we did. Let's talk about what you can do to improve certain things. And, and I did try to ask everyone, and I think I've done this over the last several years. I was like, when you're working with new people, you can tell them lots of things, but make sure you stress just the most basic fundamentals. Do not talk about crazy shots. Do not talk about cool stuff. Talk about the fundamentals. And everyone did that without me having to coach them, without me having to coach the coaches there, actively. Everyone did that. And I was both thrilled for all the people who participate in our practice who helped her, as I was for her. But yes, the magic of sparring is definitely a thing, Tristan. You nailed that.
Absolutely. And we did have a viewer question that actually kind of touches on exactly what you talked about, which is the question was, by sparring, are you talking about fighting as if you're an attorney? And yes, that is part of sparring. And it can include, well, yeah, I'm fighting like I'm an attorney, but I can kind of coast a little bit. I'm kind of taking it easy versus I have to win this fight like a crown level intensity. So you could say that sparring can take on certain levels of intensity. But generally it is a free form. You haven't put any limits on it. You haven't communicated with your opponent to say, okay, I want to work on this particular thing. There's a term in martial arts training called, and they will take somebody who's working with you. For example, you wanted to work on, say, delivering a leg shot. You say, okay, I want to work on when you step a certain way, I want to build to being able to exploit and take that leg shot. So what I want you to do as my partner, occasionally move that way, because I want to be able to spot it and take advantage of it. So now you've got like a cooperative relationship with your training partner, not merely a competitive one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we see that in boxing too, right? We do get a little bit of that in boxing as well. You get sparring partners who come in sometimes that have specific things they do that the coach already knows. So they work on taking advantage of those things. That person could be slower That person could be right or left-handed.
Longer reach.
So, yeah,
All that
longer
kind of
reach, shorter reach, all of these things for what we do, that could be the same thing. It's like, hey, why don't you go spar that left-hander over there? And that doesn't mean that you're fighting at a crown level necessarily, although there are people that think sparring is, full out every time. So don't be surprised. This is where that part, that communication piece really comes in. There are a lot of places like, hey, can we warm up first and go 50% and 75% and build into something that's a little higher. There are sometimes I'll spar and not strike my opponent. I'll make it look like I'm going to strike. I'll, do stuff, but I'll just work on my footwork back and forth because I know that I don't need to be striking at this person. I want that person to strike me, but I can still work on stuff myself as well. But at some point, you do still want to offer your opponent those crown rounds. And it doesn't matter where you are. I mean, if you can tell that they're not ready for them, then just leave them out. But even a young opponent, sometimes those crown rounds are really important. And that means, hey, let's do 3, crown rounds. That means I'm going to be full out. If I one shot the guy 3 times or girl 3 times the same way, that's fine. All right. Because they get to see my speed. They get to see me fighting a real crown round. And somewhere down the line, they'll figure that out and block that shot. And then I'll have to find a new shot. And then they'll figure that out and block it. But I'm not going to do that all night long because there's a lot of beating going on, not a lot of learning. What Ailgheanan was talking about is that interaction in a sparring match. It's like, hey, that was great because, you need to not only recognize the things they need to fix, but recognize the things they do well because you want them to come back.
Yeah, there's an
One of the
addendum to the question too. Sorry, just to add this in, they said, are you talking about slower practice speed and lesser force? Because once you take the intensity level down, you can sort of adjust it either way. So we can add that to kind of the description. Ailgheanan, you had something you wanted to add in.
Yeah, I just want to say, oftentimes we train sparring like the way that we train tourney, and in tourney, the expectation of the corner, so to speak, your corner, if we're thinking of it from a boxer or an MMA perspective, is you don't say a thing. The fight only happens with the fighters, the two combatants, and while there's something wonderfully magical about that, there is something to be said for also sparring and having immediate verbal feedback or keep shield up, as it's happening, the communication with the trainee of what's going on. It's like, there's times I'll be in the middle of a sparring fight and you're floating your arm, if I'm actually competitive, I just hit the arm. But the teaching moment there is to communicate it without actually reinforcing it with this smack. You don't have to do that when you're sparring. So and when we talk about sparring versus, training, and we're talking about it from one might be better than the other, that's probably where we are talking about just crown rounds. If we're talking sparring from the perspective of let's just go out and fight me versus you, we're in a bear pit per se, like we're fighting at a bear pit. We're fighting in a, real competitive situation. That's where we can say one might be better than the other. This active training / sparring, there's a lot of beautiful learning opportunities that come from that, both from the being trained and from the trainer. So, but like I say, we don't get the thing where Rocky's coach is yelling, from the corner, how to fight better or how to win this particular fight. So we have to do ours more in what I would call the training sparring, which, and I really think the way we should think of sparring is it is different from those 3, like give me your crown rounds. I think that's fighting. I think that's pure on competition. That is the actual end game of, of the result of the training. So I I'm not sure that I think of that as sparring as much as I think of that as just, that's fighting. That's the real deal.
There are plenty of practices that are just get your arm around and go fight, and that's how you learn. I suppose that's how we should be, what we should be addressing is that all you're doing or not?
And that's where we're probably all going to line up and say, well, while there's value to that, ultimately you're not going to be training to your full potential that way. It's a slow learning curve, just fighting.
Go ahead, Tristan.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I don't think that it's all fighting or going 75% and not hitting as hard. I think most sparring in practices that do bear pits or that do, singles matches and everybody sort of the singles is this sort of gray area where you're fighting full speed, but you're all working on something. So you're thinking, and it's not about just executing your opponent. It's about making your opponent do certain things and then executing the technique that you're working on. And for me, that is sparring. And that's been the majority of my practices the whole time I've been in the SCA. And what makes that more valuable is when you tell each other what you're doing, and you're not dumbing it down. You can do that, but I don't think that's sparring. I think that's actually training. And then you can get feedback from each other. But to me, like the sparring part is really more about I'm engaging my brain more about what I'm trying to do or what I'm trying to make you do.
And that kind of bridges us right into what are the disadvantages of fighting as your pure learning tool. Who would like to start with this one? Maybe we'll go.
I can go ahead. Rick, and you're
Brannos,
on as well. Do you want to?
Go ahead.
Okay. So some of the potential disadvantages of just sparring. One is it's more dangerous. You're getting hit harder. You're possibly, you no matter what, we get hit in places that isn't armored or whatever. So, make sure. One thing is I've seen people go out and just kind of, I go to practice and they forget armor, or I don't need this today. So you got to be really careful and know. So that's a potential issue.
It's also harder on your gear. You're going to wear out.
It is harder
faster.
on your gear.
Your armor's going to break faster. Shields are going to start breaking down quicker.
It can also be harder on your mindset, your mind as well. I mean, take a look at Ailgheanan's practice. He probably, if you're running a bear pit, let's say, and you're the guy that's losing or girl that's losing all the time, sooner or later, it's just not fun for you.
Right.
And even at our practices, I've had people is like, I just feel like a pell, and that's not fun. So you have to, it's great for you because you're winning. You just like, oh, well, that person's gone. Let's move on to the next. Oh, that person's gone. But it's not great for the society. And it's actually not great for you in the long run because you don't have somebody else to continue to help you practice things. So you have to be really careful on how your fight practice works. So if it's just bear pit after bear pit after bear pit, some people on the bottom are going to go away. You might get people to fill it in for a little while, but there are people with potential, if they had more training, would be better fighters and maybe in the long run push you even to be a better fighter. So,
and here's where I have to channel Sean and be like, you're not there to be king of practice. We would be remiss not to mention his great slogan of that. And it's easy to think of practice in terms of fighting practice in terms of you building your skill, but your participation there is also building the SCA. So if you succeed at one and fail at the other, the long term is going to be a disaster.
Yeah, I would agree.
That's a good point.
Win at all cost issues, and that means it's like you start not taking stuff, and start getting into bad habits that way. It's like all you're looking for to win, and you're not really training, you're not helping people, you're not motivating people. Harder to learn a technique. It can be very difficult to make somebody especially somebody that's good, do the same thing over and over again. So you can learn the timing and how to execute it. That's where drilling really does help to get that, you
have that great focus.
Yeah, exactly. It's you learn to fight certain type of people. Maybe if you're just fighting at your local practice, congratulations, you can be king of your little pool at practice, and then you walk out somebody and somebody smokes you. Or you go out to Antier and somebody smacks you with something different, because it's totally different than what you're used to. So, it's, that's another issue with just sparring. You don't get to see different styles because everybody's fighting at a level that they're supposed to be fighting at in a way they're supposed to be doing it. You go into some training or even pseudo sparring or training, however we want to call that. And, I'll do, here I am, I'm going to do the clamshell style. I'm going to do Old Castle. I'm going to do whatever so that they can see different styles. And here's probably the worst one. And that is, and I see this almost everywhere I've been, you learn to go down to your opponent's level. You know what the best part of sparring is and worst part of sparring is that you actually train to go down to just above your opponent's level. Guess what? Not a great idea when you actually are fighting.
It's
So
great
my
for your
biggest
opponent.
disadvantage,
Yes, it is good for your opponent.
my biggest disadvantage is that, my first 10 years of fighting, I think I just learned, I learned and got where I got from sparring. And I was not an effective teacher at the end of that first 10 years of fighting. When I started trying to teach and train, and then I basically had a slow uphill battle to become an effective trainer, and that means we stopped just sparring and we started working on things, and we started, you start coaching people through things and you start growing as a trainer. But my probably most consistent and greatest strides that I took as a fighter came when I started training effectively. So I got better as a fighter the better I got as a trainer. At least I got more consistent. I mean, it's not like it didn't make me faster, and it didn't make me taller, and it didn't make my reach any longer, but it made me consistently make less mistakes when I started having to help other people make less mistakes and to work and to train them out of their bad fundamentals into good fundamentals. So, to me, I think the absolute worst thing you get from just sparring, especially just competitive sparring, is you don't grow as a teacher.
I'm not sure if Brannos said this already or not, but one of the big disadvantages of just sparring too is the physical detriment to your body.
Yeah.
People hit you low or you get hit in the hand or the arm, and you're getting hit full speed and full power. And that can really take a toll on your body in really horrible ways. So to me, that's one of the disadvantages of only sparring, because you are really upping the chance that you're going to get hurt.
And even internally, from elbow problems, shoulder problems, from forcing blows, not using, trained form. Because how many of us put too much into it when we started out? We thought, well, more muscle is better. We need more strength. We're going to just, throw things around. And by doing that constantly, especially with, how many fighters actually do any warm-ups, very few, then you're starting to look at building the pieces of muscle strains, tears, all the stuff that will start to keep you from the field. And I wanted to add one more in there too, which is, it's easy to look at going to a practice from a perspective of somebody who has many years of experience and thinking, well, I can go in there and try to basically compete, just go fight, but also consider how this is for, people that are intermediate or even beginner. Does a beginner want to go in and get to choose, like, okay, am I going to go fight Duke Thunderstick over there, or am I going to fight this knight who I'm going to be just a pal, or do I fight somebody about my skill level? And that's where, two beginners just fighting each other is almost one of the worst things you can do, because they're not going to learn or pick up anything from one another. And then you get all right, so I'm an intermediate. Do I want to go get beat, or do I want to feel good by, fighting somebody who's not as experienced as I am. And you wind up going down that road of, okay, now what am I going to have tonight? Am I going to limp home, or am I going to feel good about myself by, smacking somebody around that can't stop me? And I think these are all dangerous things, because they will lead to, a low morale and a low level of interest of people coming back, whether it's the new people that just get beat on, or even, the knights and dukes who nobody wants to come and fight them because they're scared they're just going to get, bruised up and banged up. So I think that's a like kind of a social disadvantage. And it also feels like you have very little support from the people that are at practice, very little interest in your development from them. And if there's anything any society needs, is that mutual support to say, either I've got experience, let me help you, or I don't even have experience, but I still want to help you. If there's a way that I can help you be better, tell me and I'll do it. I think that sentiment alone can help a great deal for building the camaraderie that we have in the fighting community.
Well said.
Any other disadvantages we want to cover? I can think of one, but and that we've kind of covered a little bit, which is removing the pain. It's my experience that as soon as you have pain on the table, it's very difficult for people, especially newer people, to learn. They are frightened more than they are open to learning. And Brannos and I were talking a little bit, even in years previous, about starting to use boffer swords and whatnot in order to introduce people to full speed sparring without having to have them go home bruised up and wondering why they would ever want to do this art. And we both started it and had mixed reviews, especially from experienced people who went through the crucible of being beaten up regularly for years, and kind of go, well, why would you ever want to bother with, padded stuff? But I think if we look back at the retention rate, I think we probably lost a lot of people by just saying, you know what, this is too hard of a sport. I don't really want to limp. I work with my hands for a living. I don't want to have them bashed up or what have. I don't want to risk it, that sort of thing. And I think
Let me throw you real quick in there, Tristan, because that's
go ahead.
This is a huge point. So hopefully we're moving past that, but it wasn't that long ago that we glorified the kinds of fighters who would brusquely say, well, I'm going to run off the people who don't really deserve to be here.
Right.
I'm going to make that little girl has no business actually fighting. And I'm going to make sure that, by the time we're done tonight, she'll realize she needs to go make clothes or something. And, those people, when I first started, those people were actually talked about as if they were some kind of heroes to the sport. It makes me so mad right now. I'm about to have tears, but, I believe we've moved and we're moving and we're going to continue to move past those mentalities, but it needs people like ourselves and people who are like-minded across the SCA. Those are the people that need to be weeded out of fighter practice. Those are the people who need to conform to our notions that we want to try to give everyone the opportunity to become fighters and to find out if it's their activity. I don't think they should beat it out of them. At that point, these are sanctionable within the society, activities or ways of doing things. So, I'm glad we've moved past that, but every so often I'll still hear someone, or I'll sense that they're doing it, and
echoes. They're like echoes of an older time.
I don't know that if I'm any better, because I've tried to beat the people who do that out of the society, so I'm not sure if I'm any better, but it has definitely hit my justice button and made me want to, show them what they were doing in probably the worst way. But still, hopefully we're moving past that. But you're absolutely, we talk about retention now, and it's important that we need to talk about retention, but we also need to talk about recruiting. And by doing that is we need to give all these new young fighters the best opportunity to learn and decide if this is something they want to do. And that does not include, well, let's make sure you can deal with the pain.
I just wanted to add is that there's not like an initiation where we have to haze people. Just because it was one way for us doesn't mean we can't make it better. I mean, that should be the whole point, is to make it better, and to make a system better. And I do think it's important that people understand how hard they're going to get hit before they invest the money in the armor. But that doesn't mean that you have to, give them concussions or give them huge leg bruises or whatever. That you don't have to do that. And if people are questioning the utility of using foam weapons, I just fight some of the guys from Anstioria, the two sword guides. They train with foam weapons still all the time, and it works for them. So the proof is there.
Yeah, they're definitely some of the best fighters right now, for sure.
Yeah, and in fact, we had a conversation about this when we had Lucan on, and that is, we're not the, we all think we're big and bad, but the Europeans, the Russians, Yugoslavians, the Ukrainians that are doing steel, all use foam, because steel every day tears their kits apart. They can't practice as long. They can't do all these things that make them a better fighter, because they just can't keep doing that over and over again. So they practice foam all the time. The idea is, and Tristan posted a really nice article on this a while back, and that is, just get out there every day and do something. It's a number of hours doing it. It doesn't have to be super hard. You don't have to abuse yourself, so you have to take 3 days off. You're better off doing something that you can do every day, because over time, your number of hours doing it increases. That same thing happens with foam. I've been using foam for years and years. Sometimes when the shoulder was in a place where it was like starting to ache, or I was beginning to come back after something, I'd use foam just to take the pressure off of that. We don't care at our practice for foam, who's using foam, who's not using foam. People come out and it's like, hey, you want me to switch foam? I'm like, I don't care. Hit me with rattan. It doesn't bother me. I'm the one that chose foam. The trick is with foam, you just have to watch. It was like you hit somebody with something, they're going to miss stuff all the time. So you just have to understand that. And the second piece is, and that's your choice. Second piece is, if you hit something with that you knew you couldn't hit with the rattan, just tell them, don't take that. I couldn't do that with rattan. But, foam is an incredible, incredible tool. And we use it to keep people around. It's like, hey, you didn't bring a helmet, you didn't bring armor, you don't have armor. You want to just, I'll be a live, Pell, and I'll walk around and have them throw stuff at me. When we're doing drills, we have them use foam. So because it's about the mechanic and not about the weapon. I've taken people I know that just will not listen to me, and because they're too busy thinking about hitting hard, and give them a foam sword and say, here. And now they start listening, because they're like, well, this ain't a sword. Yeah, you're right. That is not a sword any longer. So now you can listen and stop throwing a sword and start doing what we're talking about. So it's a great tool. I'm going to throw that out there.
And I remember years ago, before the whole foam thing started to come around, I was a big proponent of the term slow work. When you actually slow down and flow more, you weren't focused on power or speed, but you're focused on position, timing, reading, movement, that sort of thing. And boy, most fighters just get bored. Like, I don't want to do slow work. I want to just go fight. And this comes down to the math, and that I actually got that from a video interview with an MMA trainer, a very famous one. And he said, it breaks down to simple math. If you have the physicality to go hard and fast for 30 to 45 minutes straight, and then you're done, you're exhausted, how are you going to do when you're doing that, let's say 5 days a week, versus somebody who's going slow? They can roll and they can practice for 3 hours a day, and they do that 5 days a week. Now look at the math, and you do it for a month, and then he added up the numbers, and I mean, you're talking an immense difference. And this is how Russians are training MMA. It's how they're training boxing, because they will train. And now, granted, we're all not even amateurs. We're doing this as a hobby, but the point is the same. If you go to a fight practice and you go full tilt for 30, 40 minutes, and then now you're exhausted, and then you realize, well, okay, if I'm tired, I'm going to fight sloppy, so I'm not going to fight sloppy, and I'll do that. Or you go to a practice for 2.5 hours, and you're doing slow movements, smooth, you're adjusting your feet, you're dealing with your balance, you're range control, reading opponents, all that, and you're doing 2.5 hours instead of 30, 40 minutes, that's a huge difference, huge. And of course, you know, we've got the wear on the equipment, wear on your body, all of that stuff goes down, and you can do more of those soft skills that connect all of your fighting together. And it doesn't matter if you're doing it once a week, twice a week, 5 times a week, or you're doing it 7 days a week. If you go full tilt and then you don't have anything left, now you're done. So that time,
I gave it all I had for 5 minutes, man.
That's right. And it's the guy who was there standing at 6 that gave you the trouble.
That wins the day. Yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, I've been guilty of this myself, but I've seen almost every fighter that I've run into. I mean, you get juiced up, you're ready to go, you know, let's go and go hard. But it's really putting a huge obstacle in your own way. It's lowering your training time and lowering the amount of opportunity you have to learn, just because you're impatient and want to rock and roll. So I think that's a disadvantage to be wary of. All right. Any other disadvantages we want to cover? Did we go through?
Oh, I'm sure there's a million of them out there.
I'm sure there's a million of them, but I think we've covered the big ones. Now
Yeah.
let's get into the advantages of training. And by training, that's kind of an umbrella term to cover things like drills.
It could be sparring one-on-one.
It could be
somebody's gonna
some
throw
kind of a
something.
limited rules sparring. And by rules, I mean, okay, we're going to actually do a bit of live work, but it's going to be focused in this particular, in a small area. It's not I have to beat my opponent. Instead, it's one person's going to be, they call it a feeder in martial arts oftentimes, but I'm there to be, I'm like holding the pads, like a boxer would hold pads for a boxing competitor. All the way down to some of the drills that Brannos shows with physical conditioning, movement, like the agility ladder, you know, stuff like that, working on a Pell. And there's a lot of creative ways to work on a Pell. In fact, there's a number of videos out there that I know we've collected, and there's other ones on YouTube that I've seen that are pretty creative. It's not just standing there bashing away on a tree, but integrating movement, all these kinds of different things. So let's cover some of the advantages that drilling and training have. I suppose we go with our order. Brannos, why don't you start at the top?
All right. So I'm just going to cover these real quick. I'd like to have a little bit more time after, but some of the advantage of drilling is it allows you to isolate technique and practice them. And that's a really important part to being comfortable and getting that technique natural in yourself. Allows for newer fighters to learn in a safe environment. And then, you know, as much as, you know, lots of people, you know, or some people can just walk out there and, you know, they're out there in their glory and start talking to people. That's not everyone. In fact, that's relatively a pretty rare case. Most people walk out there, they're going to be quiet. They don't know people yet. They're shy. They, you know, welcome to the SCA. This is where we live all the time. And if you ignore them, they're going to go away. So this allows them to be in an environment where they don't have to worry about, you know, they watch a fight and somebody's just creaming somebody. They're like, I don't know if I can do that. You have to get them into a safe place, and then you can build that safe place and show them and make sure they understand that there are guidelines in place to keep them safe through this. And if that's their armor, if that's their people they fight, if that's their defense, then it helps them develop that safe feeling. Otherwise, people will go. If they don't feel safe, they will go, and they should go if they don't feel safe, if you ask me. Sets good foundation for offense and defense before actually sparring. So even if you're doing really light, slow works, really light sparring, or you're just a moving Pell, you know, you could literally, and I do this because I have somebody that needed it. And this is the other thing here is people learn differently. But they needed to see what they had to do and drill it and throw that shot. Then the next time I had them walk forward and find the time in when to throw that shot. And then I would have them walk backwards and find that time. And then I'd have them do multiple angles and still throwing the same shot. So we're just developing the shot one step at a time until I'm walking around indifferent, just changing my ways, and they're finding time while I'm changing, following me, making that connection and throwing that shot. And then we move it almost into sparring, where their primarily job is I'm going to give them some tension and things like that, maybe throw a shot once in a while. But their job is to throw that shot on me when I leave it open or when they can see those times. So it was developed from the very front to the very end. And that's hard to do when you're sparring. It's very easy to do when you're drilling. So take that in as an opportunity to help somebody that really what we do is you have to build them from the ground up. And it helps evaluate weakness that needs to be worked on. So, in a fight, sometimes you can see something, sometimes you can't. If somebody's throwing a wrap and you're the one trying to help them, maybe you're not seeing that they're throwing it flat in the back of your legs because, you don't have eyes in the back of your head. You can kind of see their hand, but maybe you're not sure. If they're throwing a wrap on a pell, you're like, oh, no, they're not hitting. You could look right at it and see what's going on. So you can see these things that are happening inside drilling much clearer because it's right there in front of you. Also, what happens in a drilling session is they may not be wearing all their helmet or holding a shield, and you can see the difference that's happening. Let them, they don't even have to be in armor. And you can see, okay, they're throwing that perfect. They put their arm harness on and now they can't, it looks like a crap. They can never get the sword back or, something's happening. So you can make some better evaluations. But, what happens a lot of times, we fill them with armor, we give them a sword, giant sword, we give them a shield and we're like, okay, throw it this way. We don't even know if they can throw it that way out of armor yet. So you're complicating the levels in which you're trying to train somebody with gear and everything else. So let them throw, get them to the point where it's like review all the stuff you're working on, get them in armor, let them throw again against the pell, and then go ahead and let them throw on you or a moving person or, essentially, the same thing we have martial arts, the person that's going to be trying to help them. So that's the nice parts about drilling is it helps you recognize things, also helps lay down probably the biggest piece. It lays down the foundation. If somebody doesn't know how to move and they go out there and just stand there and they don't know how to get it out of a way of things, it doesn't, they're going to get beat up. They're going to get and not feel good about it. Defense, same way, going to get beat up, not feel good about it. If you lay in that good foundation, they may get hit. But I'm going to tell you, at least they're blocking stuff and they can see a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, if they feel ineffective, they will be disappointed. And that leads to frustration and why would I come back? I don't even know what I'm doing.
Right. Yeah. Ailgheanan.
Damn you, Brannos. So while you were speaking, I thought I'd, try to organize my thoughts and jot a couple notes down real quick. And when I, leaned back up to, finish you as you were finishing up and get ready to talk, I realized you had just laid into my points more perfectly than I was going to. So just I guess to kind of reinforce. So one of the things we do as trainers is we have to, and what we do as fighters is we're constantly taking in information that we're seeing on the field, and then we run that through a process of analysis so that we can then communicate or, in the sense of a trainer, you're then going to be able to communicate what a person or what a trainee is going to require to get better and most efficiently get better. And when you're, from a straight fighting perspective, you're taking all that information in and then you're processing it on how you're going to win a fight. But from a training perspective as well, you need to see something to be able to analyze it, to be able to then provide the right input. And when you see it repetitively in a drill situation, you're going to make that analysis more quickly and you're going to be able to make it more effectively. I mean, sometimes I see this happen, and I'm involved in this sometimes. You'll see something once in the midst of a sparring situation, and then you're going and trying to, coach through it. Whereas you may not have seen it correctly, and then the person says, well, actually I, did this instead of that, or I tripped and it wasn't that I was trying to do something with my footwork, So when you can run through drills, then you can actually see something and you can note for a fact, oh yeah, they're not doing this correctly. They're weak on this particular aspect of it, and then you can correct it. And then, as Brannos has also said, then if you're going back and doing it in drills, you can say, yes, you're doing it correctly, and that repetition of doing something correctly moves us towards more consistency. So all that is very effective and very good advantages of using drills. One of the reasons that I like drills a lot isn't as much from necessarily something I personally do, but you know, when you're in the role of kind of a head coach or head trainer, using drills as a means to grow another trainer is a really great early stepping stone. So, hey, Squire so-and-so, or even, hey, Sir so-and-so, can you run us through these drills? That gives them an opportunity to start growing as a coach themselves, and something that they can get good at and then help other people get good at. And so it's an effective technique to growing a training culture. So it's, if you led all the drills, if you're kind of the head coach of your practice and you led all the drills, you're missing a really, really great opportunity to grow the next generation of coaches. And it's so much better when when you're coaching as a team than if you're coaching as an individual. So, I think, and again, drills give a very great learning stepping point for young coaches.
So I want to sort of add on to that, because I think the drill component of practice is really huge for culture and community. One of my favorite quotes is, my opponent is my teacher and my ego is my enemy, or maybe it's the other way around. But doing drills helps build community in the fight practice, because we start investing in one another. And it allows, in some ways, like shorter lead up to more practice time. Like if you're going to do a drill without full armor, maybe you're just doing helmets and shields and foam swords. It allows you to cut out that 20 to 30 minutes and sometimes an hour for people that like to talk, putting their armor on. And it gives you that whole time period to actually get better. And then drills also, if you have a smaller fight practice, you can focus on a lot of things with not so many people. And you don't have to lament the fact that there's only 2 or 3 of you at practice, because you can still really target things and get a lot of bang for your buck out of that practice. And I think Brannos covered most of the technical stuff, so I'm not going to rehash that.
Yeah, and I want to just echo what she said, and that is that it builds camaraderie, that when you know that other fighters that are around you care about helping you develop, and you build a bond there. If you just show up to fight, you don't have as close a bond as you do when you offer to help somebody work through a problem, help them start to break through a plateau, clean up something that they're doing that they could be doing a little better. There's very much a social bond there. And there's one thing too that it took me a while to really grasp this, which is, and this is usually comes down to when fighters get bored. They say, why should I run a ladder drill? Why should I do something, go work on my pel, or why should I do a drill when I can go do something fun and fight? And they'll run through that drill, usually begrudgingly, and their brain will say, I don't think I learned anything from that. I don't feel like I have a tangible progress from doing this. And that's the thing about a lot of these drills, they don't work that way. By running your body through these motions that you're supposed to be doing, you're teaching the subconscious mind to control your body. Like that's what's actually going on. And I found this with a number of my students in martial arts, where I'll guide their movement. Okay, we're going to go through these exercises. We're going to go through these drills, and their brain through their mouth is saying, I don't feel like I'm getting any better. I don't know if I'm learning. And then suddenly a couple of months later, they will see themselves perform correctly, and they'll go, where did that come from? Like they have no idea. I said, I've not been talking to your conscious mind. I've been dealing with training your body to move in certain ways, regardless of what's coming out of your mouth and what's going on in your forebrain. And I know all of us fighters have dealt with that argument between our body and the mind, and having thoughts that get in the way of what our body's doing. But that's really what drills and exercises are meant to do. They're meant to get your body, and we could probably get into some neuroscience with this, of how it teaches your brain to control your body in a way that you command it to, or the way that you train it to, whether that's seeing a stimulus and responding, quickly before your forebrain has a chance to think and execute. It just does it. Or your brain, when it starts shifting your body and using your legs to control your movement, it does it in particular ways. And that's where things like those ladder drills and all the exercises and stuff really have a tremendous benefit beyond what you feel like they do. And this is, I think, a trap that especially experienced fighters get into. Why should I do that? It seems boring. I don't feel like I'm a better fighter at the end of doing them, but the proof is in the pudding.
It's funny, Tristan, the way you said that, because it made me think of, the drills. I don't see what the benefit of the drills is. It's like, if you honestly think LeBron James only shoots baskets, you don't know a damn thing about competitive athletics.
Right.
I mean,
find a sport that does not focus on the fundamentals.
Right. I mean, so I think basketball a lot, but I mean, you can take it to any of those activities. And if we want to bring it back into competitive fighting, any boxer or any MMA fighter, if you think they're just, working on the sparring aspect or the fighting aspect or the,
they hardly do, actually.
Yeah. Well, you couldn't, Brannos. There's just no way a boxer could just box. They would be brain dead before they ever competed.
Yep.
It's, so we don't have the risk of that, but, the journey is creating a fully fleshed, holistic fighter, one that's body does what it wants to do. You train the brain, you train the body, and then you can put it out there and compete. But, drills can get, if you're not in the right mindset, drills are absolutely a drag, but it's called work.
And I think that's the biggest part, is that, for a lot of people, this is fun, and you have to let them go and have their fun and spar and do those things. But for some others, they're much more used to, in fact, if you see some real athletic people that have come out of athletic stuff, like anything from basketball or anything, school sports and things like that, they're like, hey, do we have drills that we're supposed to do, or any of this?
Right.
And you're leaving those out, and you're leaving the opportunity for them to learn better out of the equation. So it's not easy. I run, a couple of us run ladder drills, and sometimes they're just warm-ups. We just put the ladder down and we run through them just to warm up our movement, get us kind of geared up. And other times, you're somebody's on a tree, or you're starting slow half speed work or whatever, that's perfectly fine. Others, they're just not interested, and they're just going to go out there and have fun. So there's place for both, but we have to make the place for the people that do want to do drills. And we haven't really done that, because usually what happens is the best guy at fight practice, or whoever, or the girl at fight practice, or the couple who's running fight practice, or the marshal, is the person that sets the tone of practice. And if they're just fighting, that's what happens.
Right.
So you have to remember to give others the ability, especially if you see, if somebody comes in and is like, hey, they were a basketball player. Hey, can you work on jukes and movement with some of these guys? Have them run a class. Have them do some stuff at the beginning of practice while you're picking up sparring with the people that just want to spar. There's room for everybody. We need to make that room. And Rauokinn, nailed it with community. I am telling you, that's what we have to develop. And we can develop that by helping people feel safe and trust and believing in them, and working them hard to become a better fighter. They don't have to be the best. They just have to be better than where they were, to feel like they are part of something. And I think we leave that out so many times. And, I was lucky. I ended up building a community of great people. And I ended up building a relationship with somebody that pushed me and keeps pushing me every day. I go to practice, and that's wrongful. And that's what a community gave me. So remember, if you're not building that community, you may be missing out on your best opportunity to become better.
That's absolutely the biggest takeaway I've got from this evening. You know,
I agree.
I sometimes am right there in the camp of drills, but when Rifkin said it and then you reinforced it, and it got my head thinking, and it's like, you know, it takes a hero to become the village hero, but it takes a village to create a village of heroes.
Yeah.
And the community aspect of it, as much as I love fighting, one of my favorite parts of fighter practices when I was at a specific one was we all went for beer and wings afterwards. And, you know, those are going to be the memories that I have way more than almost anything else. And I think that you guys are all over this great point of doing some drills and doing these more targeted types of training is going to allow us to build a fighter practice full of people who are on very similar mindsets, same page, and are all trying to help each other get better.
Yep. All right, let's move on to potential disadvantage of the drilling. There are disadvantages, and one is we just talked about it, is some people just aren't interested in doing that. If you force them to drill, they're not going to come back. And you know, the other piece is if you drill the same things too often, people will get bored of those things, and they may not come back for specifically because they're bored. So you have to watch that some. Another disadvantage of the drills is you don't get the opportunity to learn how other people's timing works, how your timing works with other people's timing, that slow to fast, that you know, breaking momentum in a fight, and all of those pieces, those really do come out of sparring, and those are very important in actual fighting. You lose the flexibility to change in the middle of a fight. And what I mean by that is we see with boxers all the time, you hit the third round, they're like, well, my long game ain't working, I'm going to have to change something up. And they can make that adjustment and move to the other things. That's something that it's very hard to drill and do. The drills help you understand the things you can do to make an adjustment, but it doesn't help you understand how to make that adjustment. You know, you lose focus. So, and this is a really, this goes right along with, so you lose focus of, it's just about the drill, it's about the work you're doing. It's not actually about that connection with the fighter that you're trying to defeat. It's like, hey, I can go through drills all day long. That's great. But if you can't beat the guy, those drills still aren't doing something. So you got to get in that place where they come together. And that falls right into connection. Although connection is that space, as sometimes that tension, as Paula Bellatrix talks about, is that tension between two people, or that force between two people. That space between two people that you read and you change that movement and stuff. That's that connection with somebody. I can see them starting to tense up a shoulder, so I know what's going to happen. That's that connection. We don't practice that in drills much, so you don't never really get that ability to create a connection. But it is a drill that you can actually do. Paul has some great stuff to do that. That's where I came out of all the connection work I do with people. But it's not something that everyone does. You can overtrain. You literally overtrain and hurt yourself, right? Or you could be doing some type of drill that is literally hurting you, and the more you do it, the worse it's going to get. So you got to be careful in that space. And you know, we already talked about it. You're going to, you know, lose interest because of the lack of a challenge. Maybe the drill isn't challenging you anymore, or, you know, and drills won't challenge you all the time, as Ailgheanan said. You know, and Tristan talked about ladder work specifically. Boxers do a ton of ladder work for foot speed, for agility. They don't necessarily explain what each movement does in a boxing piece, but there's movements in ladder work that applies. I talk about these all the time. But the fundamental in a ladder work is you're learning to not worry about your feet and understand your center and where your body is all the time. Your feet just happen to go with it, and in different ways to create different distances and different speeds. But you're learning your center, because if you don't understand how to drop and roll your center into something, then you fall down. If your body's all over the place, it's if you lean, you create bad angles. All those things. That's something that comes out of agility work, and it may be boring. But the more you do it, the better balance and everything else you have. So, who wants to take the next step up on what else is a bad idea in drills or potentially a disadvantage?
The one that occurred to me as a disadvantage of drilling, and I've seen this in the Aikido world that I'm in, is that it's almost all drilling. There is almost no live work whatsoever. And what that creates is a giant gaping hole in those skills of reading opponents, dealing with a live adaptive attacker, that sort of thing. I think that in terms of SCA setting, the danger is that somebody really likes doing drills, but they really don't want to fight. And not that there's anything wrong with them doing drills if they like doing drills, but they have to realize that they're training an incomplete part. They're not becoming complete by the fact that that's all they want to do is kind of show up and do pel work or run ladder drills or whatever it is, and that can seem I guess kind of awkward, as much or if not more so than the one who only wants to show up and fight. He has no idea, no interest in anything except that one small aspect of fighting. And I think the danger is more of a social one than like tangible practical skill. But what I would do if I had somebody like that at a practice is say, all right, you're going to be in charge of actually running these. This is what you really love to do. Then help people do that. We had a judo group at my dojo, and they had a woman there that she really liked judo kata. I didn't even know judo had kata, but they did. And they would judge on it. You could get a world championship in judo kata as opposed to competition, and she was really good at it, but had no real desire to compete. So, there's still a place for somebody whose interest is that way. But that's about the only thing I can add on to that really great list that you just put together of all the disadvantages. I think that instead of looking at drills of having disadvantages, I'd say that there are just things that they are not designed to do. It's a tool with a certain particular use and application. And it would only be a disadvantage if you tried to use that tool to do the wrong thing. Kind of like using a wrench to pound in a nail, that sort of thing. I think what we should do now is bridge into, and this was a question that a listener was asked about a few weeks ago or a month ago, about actually doing an episode on, all right, I've got a local practice. It has a certain culture, and that the people there don't really want to do any drilling. And I want to do it. How can I introduce drills and practices and training into the culture of a practice like that? Because especially if you're not the like you said, one of the dukes or one of the senior people that are guiding the tone of the practice, how can you come in and say, well, I'm interested in learning and having a bit more structure, so can somebody help me? Ideas for how to approach that?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So this is kind of my jam.
Glad to get you on your jam.
Yeah.
So
Unleash it.
If something that you're interested in, and I especially for armored practice or like a regular group practice, I think it's really important to have a hybrid practice where you have something for everyone, because you don't want to lose people because you're trying to change it into something that doesn't interest them anymore. But one of the ways to keep the dukes and the higher end fighters invested is to spotlight them, to ask them to teach something they're really good at. And you kind of make them the focus, and they teach their little thing, and then maybe you guys do a drill on it, and then you can go spar. Or you invite someone to your practice to teach something. Or you just decide you're going to do some drills, and if people want to join you, that's great. And if they don't, that's okay too. And then as the drills start to work and they start to see that they work, you'll get a whole bunch of people coming over and doing the drills with you. Some of the challenges of that is it can be hard to put all of the onus of making it interesting and coming up with new drills and focusing stuff on one person. So I think it's really important to find like-minded people so that you guys can riff off each other and share the load. And also, by making it so that it's not mandatory, you get people that are invested in helping one another, because the worst thing about drills is when you have people that aren't invested and they aren't doing the drill right, and the person that they're partnered with is getting nothing out of it. So we also, like I think Ailgheanan and Tristan said, set up our own drill practices that aren't at the regular practice, and we'll just have like Tuesday night at our house. And then we'll make up drills to work on the things that we're interested in working on. And I find that when you take a drill and you make it applicable to something that people want to get better at, they can make that connection to how it's going to help their fight, and you get people more invested. So those are sort of my big ones. It is hard, change is hard, but I find that if you sort of move the boat a little bit, don't totally change direction, but kind of like little by little, you'll get a practice that is more inclusive for different types of learners and for actually getting better. And once the people that are doing the drills are getting better, there will be buy-in. There's just no way around it.
I think you nailed it there. I really you covered a lot of the pieces I was thinking, and even better, you is the part I love is that you brought up a number of things that I hadn't even thought about. So thank you for that. I think that the big piece sometimes is for somebody that's running a practice is the willingness to understand that maybe their way isn't always perfect for everyone else, and to be able to let others kind of spotlight and do things. Not only are you, what you're actually doing is you're giving yourself a break in a way, and you're giving the practice an opportunity to grow even beyond what you can grow it. You're giving other people investment into that practice, because the more people are invested in something, the more likely they're going to come back and do it. The more likely others that may be a little more, closer to that person will come back and keep doing those things. Others will see that there's opportunity to add things to your practice or even start other practices. And that's what helps build a great fighting community. And, there are times, and Rauokinn hit it on the head, when you're driving, when one person's trying to drive that bus constantly, it gets very tiring. And there's going to be times when you're like, why am I doing this? I get so much crap and blah, blah, blah. I know for myself, I look right back at myself and I point and I go, you know why? Because I want a great fight practice for me. Right? Realistically, in the end of the day, I'm training all these people, but in the end, and I get the enjoyment of helping people be better. There is nothing like it. It's Christmas every day you're Santa every day for somebody. But in the end, when you get to that place where you're like, I want to quit, take a look at the real reason. You're not doing it for them. You're doing it for you. I want to make sure everybody knows that. And the easiest way to help that is allow other people to help you, because they really do want to help you. So that's my 2 cents. I apologize. I'll get off the box now.
No, that was a good rant. That was a good one.
Good box. I always talked about some of that, Brannos, as sort of a spiral of excellence. One of the reasons that I wanted to become a better trainer was so I could push people to push me. Very selfish. For very selfish reasons, I started working on trying to do something that helped other people. But, you know, in the end, I think it's a lot what a lot of us have done. You know, you know, I'm sure, you know, Tristan's involvement with his dojo was because he loved it and he wanted to get better at it. And by bringing in a group of people who all want to get better at something and helping them get better, helped him get better. It's, you know, it that sort of just filters out in a lot of different ways. And I'm sure whether it's from a fighting thing or from an art thing or from a service thing, you do these things oftentimes to try to improve yourself, even if in the long run you're building a better overall community doing it.
I am so stealing that term, spiral of excellence. That is coming with me.
And that's a spiral. That's a spiral up. That's one of the things too. You know, it's not a spiraling down. It's a spiraling up. You know, you go down, and you help it push you up.
Like a tornado.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we're getting close to the end, so I think I'm going to try to, you know, give my parting shots here. One of the big disadvantages for me of doing a lot of drills is it makes it really hard for me to be the king of practice, damn it. And even though His Grace, His Highness is all about, you know, they'll be the king of practice, it's really hard for me in some parts of my head to not try to be the king of practice in one way or another. And I was talking about this with Brannos before we started, and you know, and I said, well, one of the things that, you know, we have to do is understand where the balance is. And I realized that there's a balance, and there's a balance of, you know, the best aspects of training, you know, the things that are going to make you ultimately better and to make everyone else ultimately a little bit better, you know, probably includes not just the competitive aspect of the sparring, but that competitive aspect is very, very ingrained in me. And I said something to the fact is, well, what I think you got to do is you got to be willing to change the victory conditions, or the you know, you got to move the goalpost a little differently, maybe laterally rather than just out. And I'll be damned if Romvalder in the comments didn't say the exact same thing. I mean, he even used the word, you know, I think he even used the expression, you know, you got to change your victory conditions. And I'll probably go to my grave always trying to be the king of fighter practice. But you know what? I can also be the king of the fighter practice from the standpoint of we all trained hard and we all got better and we all learned something and we all grew as a community. If we add all those things in, as long as the things that make the victory condition for me being the king of practice are, I got a little better, they got a little better, and we did it in a way that we're building a family and we're building a system that's going to be in place when I'm no longer at practice.
That's a good point. I had a little bit of a list that I put together, which Rifkin pretty much nailed all the points perfectly.
Yep.
So I'm gonna let her run with it. But I do want to add one on there, and that is for a fighter who shows up and they seem to be like the lone voice of wanting to work on something specifically, and they don't get any love from the other people who just want to put on helms and go spar. So what can you do? And that is, rather than just fall and say, okay, I'm always going to go fight my best game, and because that's what we're doing, whether it's a bear pit practice or whatever the format is, you still do have the latitude to say, all right, I want to work on a few specific things, whether that's which opponents you choose, or even with any opponent you choose. You don't have to use just your best tools to try to win every pass. You can give that up and say, I want to work on specific things, whether they're setups, footwork and movement, blow combinations, or particular blows you want to get. You know, you could, if you wanted, request somebody like, could you use your round shield? Because I want to practice against somebody that's got a round shield, or something of that nature. You can always ask. Now, if you get a bunch of like, no, I just want to fight whatever it is I want to fight, and say, now, okay, form your own plan. Even if it's just you, form the things that you want to do. Make a list of the things you want to walk out of that practice having tried and to improve on. And that's a little tricky. You know, it feels kind of like you're flying solo, but it's always better to get the help of your practice group to work on, you know, certain things. It's better to do it as a group than solo, but there still is an opportunity for you to take control of your fight practice experience and make it beneficial to the things that you want to work on. And if you are in a situation like that, you can always reach out to people in the coach's corner, post up like what challenges are you, what struggles are you having, what challenges are you dealing with, and productive ways that you could go about trying to make your fight better. So I just wanted to add that in there. You're never stuck, although it might feel like it sometimes, but there's always a way to use some cunning to get where you want to go. We did have one viewer question here that I did want to address. I think this is a good one. And that says, I'm covetous of helm time to give that up when I have opponents that I can fight. I will do a few drills or drills at a different time than a once a week practice. Am I not thinking about it in the right way? I don't think you're thinking about it in the wrong way. If you are a fighter who's dedicated enough to do drills between practices, I will applaud you, because most do not. Most people will, once they leave practice, they don't think about practice till they show up to the next one. So it's absolutely a good thing that you're thinking, do drills in between, do them on your own time. Same thing with physical conditioning, strength training, endurance training, building cardio, all of that stuff. If you're doing that between practices, you're doing it the right way. But also realize that most people don't do that, and that drills are beneficial. If you're a bit more of experienced, definitely guide newer people into seeing that there's benefits of doing what they are not seeing you do, which is you're not doing those drills at practice. So you're not providing them an example of how to improve. You're kind of doing it out of sight. So even if it's taking 10, 15 minutes, say, hey guys, here's what I'm doing between practices. I'm working on my footwork. I'm working on movement, sword work, whatever it is you're working on, share that with them. I think that's a way to substitute taking half of your practice time, if that's what you're worried about, because practice time is precious. We don't have a ton of it. So making the most of it certainly makes sense. Guys,
so Tristan, I think you nailed it. I think, that's specifically what I kind of said in the chat online, is that, sometimes you don't have a lot of time with other people, especially if you're in a remote area. If you're in a remote area, then take that opportunity, but then find times outside and do exactly what Tristan said. Communicate and maybe even offer those people who are interested to do those drills with you. Mm-hmm. So just to kind of go all the way back on this, the one thing I would say to everybody is, if you've done drills and you believe they are making you better, man, tell people, because
evangelize it.
Right. Because this is the only way we're going to change. Another gentleman online had said, and I know because his son comes to our practice, his son didn't do a lot of fighting, but he came out of soccer or some other sport. And he was like, well, it's hard to get engaged, because in those, you had a routine to go through. And sometimes that's what people need, is a routine to go through. And that's what that presented. And he actually went through this routine since January with me on Sunday Zoom class. And then he's out at practice every week and just cutting it up. I mean, he's super, super good. And I really look forward to seeing how how good he becomes. So just rolling into next week, I had some other thing I was going to say, but I got caught up into everything you were saying, Tristan. You totally, I'm like, man, I can't stop listening to you guys. So first thing I'd like to say is thanks everybody for coming out. Next week's episode is our normal elephant in the room.
Yep.
So this is a good one. Which one is it this time we're talking about?
Voting in Crown.
Voting in Crown. Is that where I fill out a ballot?
That's right. We're going to cover some different kingdom conventions when it comes to entering Crown List or extracting yourself from it. Just the concept of entering Crown to be a spoiler, all kinds of stuff about the people have always asked about, is this what happens? Do you get the Dukes come in and they can just enter the tournament anytime and they can knock somebody out and then leave? Or been always a lot of questions about that. So we're gonna cover that one in depth.
Yeah, and in fact, I think we're going to get a little history on why it even came about. So I'm looking forward to that episode. It should be great. And I just want to let everybody know too, we're changing some stuff up. We have a couple of series of things like Elephant in the Room, like our interviews with some people. But Ellen and I came up with a wonderful one, and that is heroes and traditions. And I thought, day one we bring him in, and he's telling us we're doing it all wrong, and that we need to change.
That's not how it went.
These damn new people, Tristan. Anyways, but I thought, wow, that's a great one. So we're gonna let him run with this, and we're gonna do heroes and traditions for each kingdom in order. And we're going to pull in some people from those kingdoms and talk about some of the great fighters in those kingdoms and some of the traditions that come out of those kingdoms, all around, maybe some of the training and techniques that came out of those kingdoms. We did this a little bit in Great Fighters of YouTube. It was incredible time. I have no doubt that this is going to make that even, this one's going to be even better. So Alan, I thank you for bringing that up, and thanks for running these things. I look forward to the series. I think it's really, really good. So remember, please, everybody, remember, if you have something that you want us to cover, bring it up. Drop us a note. We definitely have a list of stuff that we have coming up. I mean, I think we're scheduled, a lot of stuff scheduled all the way through November. But if something comes up that's even better than some of the stuff we have, we'll drop stuff, put stuff in. We're here to help. We really want everybody to be engaged, and doing stuff that you are asking us to do helps that.
Like good fighters and trainers, we're willing to adapt.
Exactly.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. This has been a fun chat. Once again, thank you, Vesper, for being our behind-the-scenes engineer and
absolutely
all the hard stuff. She does a great job as always. So
yeah, I tell you what, I'm gonna give a big holler out to Vesper, because not only does she help us and really helped us get on our feet and rolling and actually kicking us in the butt to get it going in a way. But she spends a lot of time doing it, and not only for us, but for other people. And she created something in a society that it's going to last with us forever. And I think there are just, it's amazing to know how many people know her now and appreciated all the work that she's done. And I want to make sure that appreciation continues. And we thank you for everything you've done for us.
Thank you all. It's my honor. I am so happy to have met everybody, and just you all are the amazing part. You've brought so much knowledge at a really, really difficult time. So thank you. And this will be a lasting memory. I guess there are so many episodes that everybody can refer to, and more to come. So that being said, I hope everybody has an amazing Labor Day weekend. Be sure to be safe, be careful out there, take care of your loved ones and friends, and just have a good old time. I hope you all have a great weekend.
have a great weekend, everyone.